Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today I want to talk to you about my most anticipated game for 2018, which is Mavericks Proving Grounds. I want to go over what we know so far with this game. It is a 400-player battle royale running on a version of the Crytek engine and using spatial OS technology to implement that 400-player count and allow for really high-end visuals, good netcode, a massive, fully destructible and reactive environment. And honestly, what more could you want from the ultimate battle royale experience? So I'm really excited for this game. It's got a lot of potential. The developers have been doing some recent dev vlogs which have shed a lot of light on what we can expect with this game, and I kind of want to go over what we know so far. First of all, the developers are planning on showcasing a decent portion of this game at E3. They haven't confirmed that it'll be a gameplay showcase, but I imagine we'll be seeing quite a bit of gameplay at E3, showing off what the game is capable of. And shortly after that, there will be a small closed beta, which they are planning to sort of gradually increase to more and more players. So it'll be a small beta rollout of the game after June. So we don't have that long to wait before we get to try out this amazing game. All right, now one of the first questions they addressed in their recent dev vlog was third person or first person. They showed a little bit of footage of the game already, and it did appear to be a third person shooter, and that got me kind of turned off to the title, to be honest, because I was like, oh god, I can't do another third person shooter. But it turns out a lot of the third person animations and characteristics are put in the game because they want to use that in their social space. So in between matches, they want this game to feel much more like an MMORPG where you have your character, you can walk around these city environments, talk to vendors or whatever you're doing in that social space, and that'll be third person, and you can admire the look of your character because a lot of your clothing and stuff will be tied into a progression system to show off how cool your character looks and whatnot. So in third person you'll be able to appreciate that, but once you join a battle royale match, it sounds like they're going to try and focus on first person perspective for that. So that's a big sigh of relief for me, as I obviously prefer the first person perspective. Now the next question is about hit markers. Are you going to have hit markers, or is the game going to be more real like Squad or PUBG where you don't get any sort of hit markers and you have to sort of observe the blood on your target? The answer to this was very interesting and a little bit concerning. They said that they're going to have like a hybrid system. So if you can see your opponent that you're shooting at, you will get hit markers when you score a hit. However, if you're shooting through tall grass or bushes or something like that and you can't see your opponent, it will not register hit markers if you hit them in that situation. The problem with this is that coding into the game engine what is complete visual obstruction versus not complete visual obstruction is going to be very hard. Battlefield has tried to do that a lot with spotting, and it's failed for many years. So I have a feeling that they're probably going to pull back on this idea and either just go for full hit markers or no hit markers rather than a hybrid system. It's one of those things where I feel like devs are constantly trying to improve upon systems that don't really need to be improved upon, and we'll have to see how it works in the long run. Fire physics was another popular topic, as one of the cool features that this game is going to allow is the ability to burn down fields of grass or dry foliage. So basically, unlike PUBG where somebody can go prone in some tall grass and it might be really hard to find them, in this game if you've got a Molotov cocktail or something that can light something on fire, you can set that field on fire and wait for them to come running out of it or die to the fire instead. So that's a really cool system, and they talked about that a little bit more with having lots of explosives in the environment, gas tanks that they might let you pour gasoline out and create like a trail of gasoline to maybe create some interesting traps in the game world. The idea of having rocket launchers with potential backblast that could cause damage not only behind them, but maybe even catch things on fire that were behind them. And then they also mentioned how this could integrate to their trail system. So if you don't know, the world has a dynamic trail making system, so you can potentially leave footprints on the ground and also leave trails in tall grass. If you don't want somebody to hunt you down or find you by following your trail through the tall grass, you could burn down a field after you've come through that field. So how fire can actually play into the strategy of the game as well. Sounds really in-depth and really cool. The next question was whether or not you could kill people using falling rubble or debris. Since the world's going to have so much destruction in it, can we use that to kill other players? The short answer is yes. They kind of elaborated a little bit and said rather than making the entire world 100% destructible, which is something that they were capable of doing, I think they're going to go with a system more similar to Battlefield, where a lot of the structures kind of have permanent places, so you can't disrupt necessarily the flow of the map, but you can change the battle of specific areas by taking down walls or collapsing outer structures of buildings and stuff like that, which I think is a good compromise to full destruction, because full destruction can often result in the complete breakdown of lanes and pathing in maps, and we saw that with games like Battlefield Bad Company 2. So as far as destruction goes, it sounds really good, and they did say that you will be able to kill people using destruction, and that things like bridges will be fully destroyable, so you can take down a bridge, reducing somebody's path to get beyond a certain location, and if you take down the bridge while they're on it, you could get a kill that way. So that sounds really cool. Then there's questions about tracing rounds. Will there be tracing rounds, and if so, how many will be in the game? This is a good question because it sort of lets you know, are the devs going for ultra realism where you can't see any shots going through the air and it's going to be really hard to track and figure out where your enemies are coming from, or will the tracing rounds sort of telegraph the location of your enemies? And the devs did confirm that there will be tracing rounds. They're still working on how many of your shots will be tracer rounds, but the idea behind this is that they want it so that once you commit to an attack, you should generally finish up that attack because your opponent's going to have tools to figure out where you're attacking them from, rather than being completely stealth in your position and unable to be located. I guess the idea is that tracer rounds will just be one extra tool for your enemy players to figure out where you're attacking from, and also a little bit easier for players to sort of confirm the trajectory of their shots as well. Then of course there's questions about customization. Can you customize your player and weapon? And yes, you can customize your player. You can customize their face as much as you want, and then you can do tattoos and scars and face paint and that kind of stuff. But also there's going to be an elaborate progression system. So a lot of the gear that you can wear and equip will be tied into the progression system. So you can show off how good of a player you are, or how much you've played based on some of the items and gear you can equip. Weapons will all be found in game, Battle Royale style, but they're going to have weapon customization like suppressors, 4x scopes, grips, all that kind of stuff. So there'll be tons of weapon customization. They're also working on weapon skins, and they said that they don't really care for a lot of the way that weapon skins are done in many games now, which is just sort of a standard camo, slap it on a bunch of different guns. They really want to get very custom with their weapon skins for each gun. They think that we're going to like it a lot. So it sounds like some of the potentially high-end weapon skins for Rainbow Six Siege that get really in-depth and detailed with the way they customize their guns, we might see stuff like that in Mavericks. Then there were some general questions about the game mechanics. You know, players want to know how this game's going to play out, and the devs really wanted to avoid comparing this game to PUBG or Fortnite because they said basically their game world adds so much more depth with the realistic physics system and destruction and many other of the other highly realistic approaches they take to the game. It allows people to think on strategic levels that just simply aren't available in these other games. And so the strategy and depth in that regard, they said, is significantly beyond what's available on the market right now. In addition to that, they sort of have the MMORPG social space, which is very different from the current battle royales, and a lot of the gear again is based on skill and progression. So that's a bit different. I don't know what that means regarding microtransaction systems, if they're going to have a microtransaction system, or if they're really going to try and tie most of the gear and cool loot into an actual progression system, which I think would be awesome and a great incentive to keep playing the game or doing better, getting placing higher, you know, might give you a better chance of getting some of the higher level gear or something like that. So I love the sound of it so far. Now, a cool question, which is something that I've always criticized certain games for, is graphical parity. If you set your graphics to the low quality, will you have a significant advantage over enemy players? And the devs apparently are extremely aware of these issues and are trying to avoid it at all costs. And they said that even on low graphics settings, they think that we'll not only be impressed with the visuals, but there shouldn't be any sort of graphical difference. Like even seeing silhouettes at a distance between high settings and low settings should not be different. And so they're very cognizant of this specific issue, and they brought up games like PlanetSide, which is, in my opinion, one of the worst offenders of graphical parity, in that turning the graphics on low setting gave you an insane advantage over players playing with high graphics. So hopefully that won't be an issue. The next question was on confrontation mechanics. Aside from a shrinking play zone, what is going to be the main mechanic to get players to fight each other? And that's a big issue in PUBG. You know, if you're really trying hard to win the match, avoiding combat is pretty much one of the best strategies in the game right now. There isn't a huge incentive to go out there and go for loot crates. It's why they call it streamer loot, because it's fun to watch, but strategically it's a terrible idea because the advantage you get on loot crates is often not worth the risk. And so the devs for Mavericks talked about removing the RNG factor from a lot of the in-game objectives. So if there's loot crates or areas that you know will have really good loot, all the players are going to know that there's really good loot there. So you know you'll get something really good, and you can basically weigh the risk versus reward in game. If you have some really bad gear or weapons and you need to go to one of these high loot areas, well, chances are other players are going to be going to those high loot areas as well. So you just have to sort of decide what the risk is worth it. So rather than an airdrop resulting in gear that you don't need or want, you should be able to know exactly what kind of gear or what kind of tier weapons you might find in a certain area of the game, and that way you will have a better idea of what to go for. This sounds great. This is a huge change up over PUBG in terms of just having random weapons and random loot. The fact that there can be 3 buildings you can run through without finding a gun, and your opponent can find a gun on their first building. It sounds like they're trying to get away from this mechanic heavily. So I love the idea of it. Taking some of the RNG out of a battle royale is a great addition to the game because they're already so RNG by nature. Removing the mechanics from the game as much as possible is a great step in the right direction. Another question was about the vehicles in the game. Is there going to be armored vehicles or only light vehicles? At the moment, the developers just want to focus on lightly armored vehicles, so cars, trucks, motorcycles, that kind of thing. They kind of played around with the idea of tanks or APCs or something, but just realistically it would be too unfair, and they don't want to create situations where you just feel like you don't have any options to kill your opponent, and that would certainly be a situation where you just wouldn't have anything to do against the tank if you had an assault rifle. Another question was about time to kill. So it sounds like their time to kill is slightly longer than PUBG, so it's going to take a few more shots to down your opponent, and they've been testing it out, and they said they're really happy with it right now, and it sort of results in often the more skilled player winning the combat, or really having to properly execute on an ambush, where PUBG you can really just kind of like ambush somebody, and before they even have a time to react to you at all, they'll be dead, and slightly longer time to kill gives a player a better chance of getting away, especially with a poorly executed ambush. So they said they're really happy with the time to kill right now. Everything I've heard personally so far from these dev vlogs has been really exciting. It sounds like they know what they're doing and what they're talking about. I can't wait to see actual gameplay footage of this game. I think E3 is going to be a very big event, and everyone's going to really start talking about Mavericks. Then I hope I get into the closed beta so I can test it out. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.